All right, so Steamgirl, you're ready and you can go whenever you're ready.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Well, that was really interesting. Is it Zhang? I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, that's
everything
fine.
Okay, great. Everything you've said about choice is so relevant. I have to apologize. My talk is still a little rough around the edges, so I hope you forgive me for a few sort of stutters along the way.
I think I'll beat you in that.
Choice design, that's what I'm going to be talking about. And I'll start by just introducing myself. My name's Nina. I use Steamgirl, I think, on the Dillemas forums or at Steamgirl Game on Twitter. I've worked in the games industry for over 10 years. And so I'm going to try and apply some of my experience from games to visual novels. And maybe we can save the debate as to whether or not visual novels are games for a different time. So I've worked for a company called Revolution for the last 6 years. They made the Broken Sword series, They're of the Temptress, and Beneath the Steel Sky. They're an adventure game company who have a very strong narrative background. My job title there is lead developer, but I'm also closely involved in the story and the narrative design of their next yet to be announced game. But in my spare time, I make visual novels, and you might have seen Stranded Hearts being mentioned a few times on my Twitter feed if you follow that. That's what I'm currently working on, but I've also done My Cup of Coffee, The Trouble with Earl Grey, and I'm trying to chip away at Emma, A Lady's Maid in my spare time. So here you go. There's Earl Grey. He's going to help me out today. My question for you guys is, if you can think, as part of this talk, if you can think of a memorable choice from any visual novel or other narrative game that you've played, and what the name of that game is and what that choice was. Although be mindful of spoilers if it's anything sort of that was released recently, and share on Discord so I can have a look at the sort of things that you guys are thinking of. Right, so interactive narrative has always been my passion, and I think visual novels have incredible potential for. Oh, sorry, my bad. Technical error. Oh dear. Something was inevitably going to go wrong. That's how it always goes. Right, just give me a moment. There we are. Sorry, just where I've completely lost the plot for a second. Right, so yes, visual novels. I think they have incredible potential for really interesting, meaningful, humorous, special choices, probably far more than any other medium. And I hope that as part of this, you're going to find ways to make choices in your games, or whether you're making them now or plan to in the future, more and more interesting. So to start with, let's have a look at your answers. Let's have a look. Well, I can see lots and lots of interesting suggestions here. Unfortunately, many of these I don't actually know, which just shows that I should probably play a lot more visual novels. Right, so bearing that in mind, can you have a think whether you think this choice was meaningful? Did you have the right amount of information to make that decision? And what mix of choice options did it use? And I'll obviously get onto each of these one by one. So to start with meaningful choices, what makes a choice meaningful? I have a very simple definition for this, and that is that it's a choice where the player believes that there are different outcomes. Typically in games, you will see A or B, C, D, etc., where one of them is correct and one or more of them are incorrect. The key here is that this is at the point of choice. So it doesn't really matter what the outcome is, but at the point of choice, the player has to believe that there will be different outcomes. If the player doesn't believe there is a difference, but there are multiple outcomes, then that choice was still not meaningful to the player. And if the player thinks that it's different, that there'll be different outcomes, but there are none, then it still is a meaningful choice, although you might feel cheated if you then discover that actually it made no difference. I'm going to go through a bunch of questions, choices, and feel free to pitch in your, vote for which ones. Yes, ice cream. So here you go. Do we go with yes, please, or heck yeah? Is this a meaningful decision? How does it make you feel? Now, we actually see these types of choices in many games because it does encourage interactivity, but it's obviously not much more than a click to continue. However, it can be used quite well to create humor, so I wouldn't discount them entirely. So let's go with yes, please. And now we get to decide what flavor we would like. Let's have a look. Any clear favorites? Okay, chocolate. We'll go with chocolate. Now, notice how this decision made you feel. That you know that it's going to have a different outcome, but actually you're still getting chocolate ice cream, or rather you're still just getting ice cream regardless of what the flavor is. So it's not a significantly different outcome, and you could have predicted that. I call these often flavor choices, in that they have more or less the same results but with slightly different flavors, and in this case quite literally. This is a great way to customize protagonist characters. They're great for creating player-protagonist affinity. Is it meaningful? Perhaps you should decide that for yourself, and maybe have a think whether your memorable choice fell into this category. Now, we're going to take that question of the flavor of ice cream and put a little trick to it. So you're only going to get your chocolate ice cream if you can guess what Earl Grey's favorite flavor is. Notice how the options are identical, but you're probably thinking about this choice very differently to how you were thinking about the last. And that's, you're probably assessing, what kind of a person is Earl Grey? What do I know about him? And what sort of things might he like? Maybe because he's a man, maybe he doesn't like pink, and therefore he wouldn't like strawberry. Or maybe, as some people have said, he looks like a strawberry sort of person. Well, vanilla is not an option, sadly, but maybe he does like vanilla. So we'll go with banana. All right. Well, that brings us on to context, because at this point in time, when you make that decision, how much information did you really have about Earl Grey, and was it enough to make that choice interesting? Imagine that you are in danger. You're being pursued through a series of tunnels by a monster, and you're trying to get out. Which way do you go? Left or right? What about now? Which way do you go now? Let's have a look at what you're all saying. Left, clearly. Right. Go left, left. Okay. Well, what about now? Do you want to go to certain death, or would you like the way out? So, obviously, you might think this is a bluff or not. So we'll go. I think quite a few people were suggesting left, so let's go left. Well, we did die, so I wasn't bluffing there. We'll go right, because I can go back, because it's Ren Pi, and therefore I can scroll back, and that's great. I'm always in favor of a scroll back, except sometimes it's quite nice for your choice to be definitive, but that's a topic for a different day. Right, so let's have a think about your memorable choice. How much information did you have? How certain were you of the outcome? Was it 0%? Was it about 50%? Did you have all the information, 100% information to make that choice? So let's go back to our first situation, which was no information whatsoever. Does this make that decision meaningful? Even though you know that there is, well, you might not know that there is a different outcome because there is no difference here. But let's say that you do know that there is a different outcome, but you don't know which way to go. This is great for when you want to create a feeling of uncertainty, if you want to surprise the player, give them a sense of tension, or a feeling of unfairness. It's great for humor and absurdity, and it suits narrative that emphasizes futility of choice, fatalism, dark themes, if you have lots of death endings. But it's a bad idea almost all of the time because it's usually not very fun. It also risks rendering the choice meaningless because although there are different outcomes, if you have no means to decide between them, then you may as well just decide at random and what's the point? Okay, so let's have a look at 100% info. When is this a good idea? It's a good idea if you're doing a tutorial or you want to communicate something very, very clearly. It's great for if you're making a choice that isn't really in character, such as, when you're purchasing romance routes in a voltage game, you want to know which one of those routes you're purchasing with 100% certainty. You wouldn't want to sort of only 50% certain whether it's going to be this guy. It's great for humor, same as the kind of 0% situation. And it's also really a nice way to create player-protagonist affinity, as you might see in games such as Zelda, where you accept the call to adventure, and the kind of the no option isn't really an option. You either you stay in bed or you get out of bed, but if you stay in bed, then nothing happens, right? You have to get out of bed in order to progress, and that's what people choose. But then they feel a sense of responsibility for having made that choice. When is it a bad idea? Almost all of the time, because if you have 100% information, it takes all of the surprise out in a visual novel. It risks being meaningless because if one option is correct and the other one is incorrect, then really the death option is not an option. So let's go back to your memorable choice and have a think about whether it was meaningful and you had the right amount of information. Now we have the third question, which is what mix of choice options does it use? And that's what I'll get onto next. When I mean choice options, I mean each individual choice that is presented. What type is it? So we'll just start with the obvious one, which is a mixture of positive and negative choice options. You have save the girl or die a horrible death. It's positive, negative. In fact, there's the example. Do you save the girl? Yes, no. What will you have for dinner? The poison apple, vegan noodles, or a beef burger? You can see there are multiple positive options. So it becomes a kind of trying to find the negative one and avoiding that kind of situation. Let's see if anybody has a particular craving for any particular foods. The vegan noodles is the poison apple. Well, let's go with the beef burger then. Okay, so imagine this is a time choice. You're falling off a cliff. Quick, 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 quick. Which one do you choose? Which one do you choose? You've got lots of negative options and one positive one, and you have to try and find the one that's going to get you through. Okay, I'm hoping most people have spotted hold on in there. Otherwise, I'm sorry, you're dead now. So a mixture of positive and negative is often about trying to find the correct solution. And this is really great for if you want to make the player feel smart. It's also a really good way if one option is a non-option, really, such as the example of, do you get out of bed or do you stay in bed? If staying in bed is basically, okay, well, then you have the bad ending, story finished. Then the getting out of bed is again, it's what gives the player that feeling of being responsible for a particular choice. And you see it done, like if you've played Mass Effect Andromeda or similar games, to that, then you will see that quite often the quest givers will ask you if you want to accept a mission. Does anybody ever say no? But there is a reason why that was an option, because you have to be the one accepting it. If it just automatically went into your mission without you ever having had the opportunity to accept it, then it would just feel weird. Right, so let's look at if you have only positive choice options. This we've had this example already with the ice cream. That was all positive, at least I hope. I mean, maybe you have a particular dislike of a certain flavor, but other examples in games might be when you choose between loot. You know, do you take the shield of invincibility or the sword of awesome? Another example is maybe in dialogue. You quite often have kind of positive is in, you know, if I'm the detective and I'm asking a person several equally weighted topics. Where were you last Friday? What's your address? How do you know the victim? You just want to go through them in turn, and you'll keep coming back to these. But there is no right or wrong answer here. In romance games, quite often a positive choice option is choosing which route you want to take. Any favorites? Well, only 2D. Yeah, I know. I wish I would have used my own art, but I didn't quite have time to give you lots of options. So, Earl Grey. Well, so let's go with Hue. Hue seems popular. So there we go. That's your positive choice. And then we can examine the pure negative ones. Up until probably The Walking Dead, I don't think many people were doing these, and for a good reason. Quite often, just presenting the player with negative options isn't very fun, because it's just a way to make people feel bad, right? And that's great if you want to make people feel bad, but it's not great if you're trying to have, you know, a positive, fun game. So an example from The Walking Dead, hopefully this isn't too spoilerific because it's been out for quite a while. At the start of the first episode, you get a choice. Do you save Duck or do you save Sean? So just to give context for people who haven't played this game, you're in a kind of zombie apocalypse setting, and zombies are either trying to that they've grabbed onto both of these characters, and you can only save one. So this choice isn't really about saving someone, it's about who dies. You're thinking about who is what is the least bad option, and they make you feel awful, because when you save Duck, then Sean dies, and when you save Sean, Duck dies. So we're gonna save. Actually, he doesn't die because I think his dad saves him in this case. But in the subsequent options, that certainly is the case. And then maybe, you know, a slice of life, more simple example might be like chores. Do you fold the laundry? Do you do the dishes? Nobody wants to do chores, but you got to choose one of them. You know, that's kind of a very mild example of that. But they're very useful if you really want the player to feel a negative emotion. Right, let's fold the laundry here. And then I just want to get onto dilemmas, because for me, they're the most interesting choices. And I will bet that the majority of your memorable choices will be of this type. So dilemmas are actually positive and negative choices versus other positive and negative. And I'll take an example from Dragon Age, where if you imagine there is a boy who is possessed by a demon, and this demon goes out and kills people in the village every day. When you fight your way through and you get to this demon, you have a choice of whether to kill the boy who's possessed by this demon to stop the killings in the village once and for all, or you can go and visit the mages, which will take time, which means that more people will die in the village. So this is a real dilemma, because on the one hand, if you kill the boy, then obviously you save the people in the village. But if you want to keep the boy alive, then people in the village will die. Another example is Mass Effect with the Rachni Queen. I downloaded a picture of the Rachni Queen for this, but I forgot to put it in. She looks very scary, and she's been doing some sort of possessing of people to try and talk to you. So you come into this scenario, into this scene, actually seeing her as clearly quite dangerous. And the Rachni race, previously in history, has almost wiped out everybody in the galaxy, but now they're just a small number of them that are being experimented on. So you have the choice of whether you free this queen and her babies so that they can carry on, or do you kill them and they're the last surviving Rachni? So you're basically destroying an entire race forevermore. And you know, people do sit and think about this. It's not everybody, but it is profound, because you can't really win either way. You're not quite sure that it's the right decision, because the risk of saving the Rachni Queen means that perhaps they will take over the galaxy once again and try to kill everyone. But if you kill them, then you're committing genocide. It's tough, right? So, and there are many different, I mean, those are some really big examples, I guess, with lots of deaths and consequences, but you can probably think of ways to do it, you know, in more slice of life kind of situations in visual novels where, for example, helping out one friend might mean that you don't get to do something else at that time that's also important. But if you do that something else that you want to do, then obviously your friend might be in trouble, or your friend might dislike you. So you can find ways to make people think about these dilemmas. And this is really great for asking moral questions. Okay, so let's revisit the 3 central questions. When you're working on your visual novel and you're trying to put in interesting choices, then ask yourself, is this choice meaningful? Am I giving the player, the reader, enough information? Not enough, the right amount of information for this story, for this situation? And what mix of choice options am I using and should I be using? And in some cases, you might find that if you're presenting 2 positives and it seems a bit boring, think, is there a way for me to create a dilemma out of this? Can I give some negatives to these positives to make it a more interesting choice? Or could I add a negative choice option amongst these positives so that the player then feels smart because they have found what the incorrect solution is to this particular scenario? Right, do you still want chocolate ice cream? Too bad, because you didn't guess Earl Grey's favorite flavor. So, sorry, he's a bit of a troll in this instance, bit out of character there. He's one interesting thing, and I know I said I was just talking about choices, but one interesting thing is that if you have given the players a profound choice within your story, it is really great later on in that story to remind them of the fact that they made that decision, and that really makes that choice memorable for people. So thank you very much for your time. I hope this has been useful. If anybody has any questions, let me know. I'm also happy to chat more about this, you know, via Twitter if you want to have a more one-on-one exchange. What was his favorite flavor? I actually, okay. I actually didn't give him a favorite flavor. I cheated. But in my mind, his favorite flavor is chocolate.
Yes. All right. Okay, so we're slightly behind schedule, slightly. So I'm going to give Flo presenter mode so that she can get prepared and start whenever she wants. But questions just in the chat. You can at me, you can at Steamgirl, you can and just like, or save it for lunch, whatever. And we will just keep chatting. Thank you. That was awesome.
Thanks.